Hey friends, it's Corey from Hey Let's Make Stuff, and today's video is all about Siser's EasyColor DTV. EasyColor DTV is a printable heat transfer product. Basically, you're going to print your image and then you're going to be able to transfer it to a garment or other blank. Now I know what you're probably thinking, yeah, I've used printable heat transfer before, but this is very different. I really like it, so I think you're going to like it too. So this is the EasyColor DTV. Yes, it looks just like a sheet of paper, probably on the screen, but it is a little bit different. To start off with, it's sort of rubbery. I don't really know how to explain it, but it does have a backing sheet on here despite being very thin, and that makes it sort of rubbery. It's a little floppier than normal paper. And then the other difference here that you can actually see is it is white on the front and then gray on the back. It's a little hard to see in video, but you can see here that it's a little bit darker on the back and you're going to want to print on the front. So basically you're going to print your image and then you're going to either cut it out and apply it to your blank, or you're going to use a cutting machine like a Cricut to cut out your image. If your image is more complex, it has a lot of pieces, I highly recommend using a Cricut. And then you'll also use a mask, which is basically like heat transfer tape, to get the image from the backing of the EasyColor DTV to your blank. So I've got some Siser Easy mask here. I can be honest, this is not my favorite, and I'm going to be looking for some alternatives, and I'll show you why in a little bit. Even I think their high-tack mask might work a little bit better. It's just hard to get it to stick. So you'll see kind of where I struggled, but I think that that's something that you should know as we get into this video. You're also going to need a blank. So for this, you can use basically any blank. They've tested both cotton and polyester blanks, some combo blanks, but I think it should stick to almost any sort of garment blank. For this project, I'm using two onesies, mostly because I don't actually have a lot of the DTV left over, and so I'm trying to, keep myself to making some small projects here so that I can use it as much as possible until I get more. But yeah, so we're going to be making two onesies. One of these is white and one is a dark blue. I want to show you how it looks on both a light colored fabric and a dark colored fabric, because it works on both. You will also need a heat source. For this, I'm just using my Cricut Easy Press. It's working fabulously. You can use a heat press, or you can use a traditional heat press, you can use a Cricut Auto Press, but when I'm working with something small like onesies, I actually really like my small Cricut Easy Press because it can get in between the seams. I don't actually think they're making it anymore, which is like the biggest bummer because I use this little guy all the time, but maybe you could find a used one on eBay if you don't have one. Definitely my favorite size Easy Press. You're also going to need a weeding hook because this is a weedable project. If you are going to cut just like one large piece with your scissors instead of a cutting machine, you don't need the weeding hook, but if you're doing any kind of project that has any cutouts, you're definitely going to want this. And then you'll also want a scraper for applying the mask. And you may want to have a pair of scissors handy. If you're using your Cricut, you're going to want a green standard grip mat. And if you want to do some experimenting, which I'll explain later, you may want some parchment paper or a Teflon sheet. They can both give you different results, which is really interesting, and something that you can't get with normal printable iron-on. Let's hop over to Cricut Design Space to design our file. So here I have a blank Cricut canvas, and I'm using two files that I designed myself. So if I go over here to upload images, I've actually already uploaded this Hello Pumpkin and Holly Jolly file. So I want to add both of them to my canvas. And because I designed things fairly large, they'll come in here larger than we're going to need them. So the onesies I have here are very small. This white one is a 3 to 6 months onesie, and the dark blue one is a newborn onesie, so they're very small. So I want to double check how big I want to make my decal transfer here. So I'll pull out my little measuring tape. And for this, I mean, we're looking at maybe 4 inches for the white one. I think we can go with 4 inches as well. This is just an easy, if you have just a little tape measure, it's an easy way to figure out how big to make your image. So I'm going 4 inches across, so I'm going to go ahead and change that here in Cricut Design Space. And this one to 4 as well. So I brought these in as SVG files, which means they need to be turned into printable files. So to do that, all you have to do is select the image and then hit flatten over there at the bottom of the layers panel. And now they are printable images. They'll say print then cut over here in the layers panel. So that's it, we're ready to make it. You can see here that it has both of the images here within a black registration box. This is what your Cricut is going to use to read the print then cut lines. Now, I'm using a Cricut Maker. You can use a Cricut Explorer. Cricut Joy does not have print then cut capabilities, so this is really just for those bigger machines. So let's hit continue. So you're going to want to print your DTV on a regular desktop printer. You don't need a fancy sublimation printer, you don't need a fancy eco-solvent printer. This is just straight out of your desktop printer, which makes it really accessible to a lot of people, which I love. So I'm going to print my image here on this 8.5 by 11 sheet. I'm going to make sure that I'm printing on the white side, which in my Epson printer means that the white side goes down, but it may be different in your printer. When I send my file to the printer here, I'm going to keep that bleed checked because you don't want any white outline, especially if you're using a darker garment. As well as I'm going to use this system dialog box because I want to be able to select the type of paper I'm using. So if you hit print, that dialog box often opens up behind Cricut Design Space. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this if it's going to record, but I'm going to change the quality to best, and I'm going to change my, my paper to specialty paper matte. I found that that just gives me sort of the best quality print, and because this is a matte surface, I don't want it to think that it's glossy, so I'm choosing that matte surface, but I've tried a couple different prints and it by far worked the best on this matte setting, so go ahead and click print. You want to set your material to permanent vinyl as well as increase that pressure a little bit if you can. I have found that that worked really well for cutting through this particular material without cutting through the backing. Then make sure that you have your fine point blade loaded into your machine. And you can insert your mat here. And the Cricut will cut around the edges of all of your letters. So I've cut out my project here, and you can see that I've cut out each individual letter here. There's no background behind any of this. Each letter is individual. Now, if you tried to do this with a different printable HTV, you could probably have a lot of problems, but because you can use this with a mask, you can easily get all of this sort of complicated design over to your blank really easily. To remove the sheet from your Cricut mat, go ahead and flip over your Cricut mat and then just peel it away from your project. Now, one of the hard things I've noticed about this is you'll see when I actually remove the backing of this, I lost this little star. This does not stick very well to the backing paper, so I'm actually going to move this one over here to the side. Try very hard not to lose it, but you'll notice that because the DTV doesn't stick to that backing very much, that it is kind of easy to lose some of the really small pieces. So just keep an eye on that when you're working. I'm going to go ahead and just use scissors here to cut out my two different transfers. There's no need to weed this whole thing. Normally if I was making a project I would use more of this sheet, but for this video I didn't want to confuse you because there was a bunch of other stuff on the sheet. So we have our two different images. Now let's grab our weeding hook and we're going to weed around all of these images. Weeding this is actually pretty easy, especially if you have that extra little bit on the a little bit of pressure on your cut, but you do want to go carefully because it can pull up letters if you're not careful. But it weeds sort of. I mean, it's soft. It's sort of a gentle weeding experience, but it works pretty well. So you can see here that I've got my big star. Now I'm just really carefully with my tweezers going to add my little star, and I'm just going to kind of be aware of it. Because it's not going to stick on here very well, but it will once I put the mask on. And then don't forget to weed out the insides of your letters, like this P, and the P here, and the center of this O. Alright, so that's our first one. Again, try not to lose that little star there. So you can see, like, basically once it leaves that backing, it does not want to stick back down, so just be aware that this is more of a delicate material. It's very, very thin. I think I read that it was 75 or 72 microns. It's thinner than any other kind of vinyl that I've worked with. So you can see that it was fairly easy to weed, but it can be a little tricky if it gets a little stuck here. The next thing we're going to do is apply the mask to our images. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is by far the trickiest part of the process for me. I've seen people use this mask all the time, and I'm not sure why I struggle with it more, so you may have an easy time with it, but if you are struggling, don't think it's just you. It was me too. So I'm going to cut my mask the same size as my image here. I may try some other masks just to see how they go, but for now this is what we got. This is very easy to peel up. You can just peel it up like this, and you'll throw away the white backing piece. And then you'll put the plastic piece down on your image. Now remember, I've got this tricky little star here that doesn't want to stick, so I'm going to try and get him close to where he needs to go. you'll basically lay this, like bend this in half and kind of start in the middle and work your way out. DTV really has a tendency to want to, there we go, to want to fold in on itself. So make sure when you're putting the mask on that that doesn't happen. Now I'm gonna burnish the this transfer mask to the vinyl here. And I'm telling you, I do this, I mean, I burnished this really hard and I still really struggled with it when I was working on some other projects. So we'll see, and we'll also see if I can find something that may work a little bit better if you're also struggling. So I'm gonna burnish it from both sides, really get it to stick. Like, come on. Let's get this sticking here. And then you should be able to peel away the mask. Should be being the operative word. Now you can see here that I'm already struggling. So what I do is I'm basically going to go through and try and get it to stick. You can use a weed, you can use your tool, you can use your finger. I find my thumbnail works the best to just get everything to stick as you go through. So again, this is really a pain in the rear, and I wish I had an easier way to do it. I've actually reached out to Siser to see if they have any tips and tricks. This is kind of a struggle, but you just kind of work your way along. If there are bubbles, they're actually very easy to get out. You can kind of just use your weeding hook to pick up the letter and kind of put it where it needs to go. So it may be a little hard to see on the video, but there is a little bit of bubbling here. Thankfully, that really does just sort of work itself out in the heat process. You don't want anything kind of big bubbles. And if you do, you can just use your weeding hook to kind of get in that bubble and just work the vinyl up. So you can see the struggle that I had there. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other one. It's gonna probably be just as big of a struggle, but I don't think you need to watch me do it. And then I'll be back to press these in just a minute. Okay, so I've got my second piece on the masking here, and I can tell you it was just as much of a struggle as the first one. But while I was working on this, I actually got a Facebook message in one of my groups from someone who works at Siser, who gave me a couple of tips. So the first tip is to actually let your print dry overnight. Part of the problem I think with sticking to the mask is that the ink is still wet, even though it's not smudging or anything like that. The ink hasn't fully dried, so it is not sticking to the mask very well. And then the second idea is to actually stick it underneath your heat press and let the radiant heat of the heat press dry out that ink a little bit. I had already started working on this when I saw that come through, so I didn't get a chance to test it. But those are both things you can test if you're having trouble with the mask itself. So you can see here that I have my transfer, and this would be difficult to do in vinyl. This is 5 different colors, so you could use 5 different colors of vinyl, and you'd have to press each one individually. You could also do it in a different kind of printable vinyl, but it would be much thicker, and you would probably more than likely have to have like a white background behind it, which is not great if you're using it on darker colors. So you can see here that it turned out really cute, and I'm really excited to put it on this onesie. So the directions here for an easy press are going to be to set it to 340 and then to do a 15-second pre-press and then to press for 30 seconds. Those instructions work great for me on my other tests, so we'll go ahead and use them on this. If you're using a traditional heat press, they recommend lowering the temperature to about 310, but because the easy press just has a different type of pressure and heat, you can crank it up a little bit to 340. So let's start here with our 15-second pre-press. So now we have a very flat and warm surface for our EasyColor. So if you go here and you press it down, you'll actually see that it starts to sort of adhere to that warm surface. Now you don't need a pressing cloth or anything, with one caveat. You can use this product without cutting it on a Cricut and without using the mask. So let's say you had a circular logo or you had a square photograph or something like that. You can just cut it with your scissors and apply it in the same method. The only difference is you have to peel back that the backing sheet off of it. So we peeled that off once it was on the mask, and that was the kind of the difficult thing we peeled off. But if you're just peeling it off one single big piece, it peels off really easily. I don't actually have a piece of that because I have run out of EasyColor to practice with, so I don't actually have an example of that. Maybe I'll do that in a separate video, or I'll put it in my blog post, which will be linked in the description below. I don't have a way to test it. But watching Joe from Siser's video, it looks like you can just peel that off and put it right on, and then you'd want to use a pressing sheet. So you'll want to use some parchment paper or a Teflon sheet, which I'm going to go into a little bit more here in a minute because I want to share some special things about that. But just know that you don't need a Cricut to be able to use this product. I've got my image on here, and I'm going to do a 30-second press with medium pressure, and that should be enough to finish our project. So when you go to peel your plastic backing off of this, you want to do it while this is still pretty warm. So you just peel up the edge here, and everything should stick. Now that's ready to go. It can cool and it will work perfectly. One thing I do like to do is flip it over and just give it a 15-second press to the back, just to really set that adhesive. All right, so we have our first onesie. I'm not actually going to stretch this right now because it's still warm, but once it dries, it does actually have some stretch to it. I mean, you can't like stretch it out a lot, but it's much better than any other printable heat transfer vinyl that has absolutely no stretch at all. Now, if you want to be able to stretch it over, say, like if you're a larger chested woman, you may want to use like individual letters like this, so each letter only has to stretch a little bit, as opposed to like one big image where the stretch might not be quite as, you know, stretchy. So that's just one tip, but it does have a little bit of stretch, you can see here. That's our first project, so let me pull out the navy blue blank and I'll show you how this looks when we do it on a dark fabric. I have my dark blue onesie here, and I've already done the preheat on it, so if you carefully flip this over, you can put this on. Now, one of the things you don't want to do is let this sit for any length of time, even just one day, because one, apparently the mask can start to pull out the color, which you don't want, and two, I don't think it helps it stick any better, so when you flip it over, pieces could fall off. All right, so I already have my dark blue onesie preheated and I went ahead and put my transfer on here, and I just want to show you how great this looks on a darker fabric. So let's do this here, make sure we're lined up, and then we'll hit it for, again, 30 seconds. Okay, so now we can peel this off. And I think this looks so great on this dark fabric. I don't feel like there are a lot of really great products for dark fabric, but this one is really, really great, and I love how this looks. One of the things that makes this Siser EasyColor DTV unique is that you can use a type of covering to change whether or not you want it to be shiny or you want it to be a little bit more matte. Now this is not going to make it super, super shiny or super, super matte, but it does make a difference, so I'm going to show you the two differences here. So here we've got our Holly Jolly onesie, and if we use a piece of parchment paper and press for another 10 or 15 seconds, this will be more matte than it is now. It has like kind of a little bit of a medium shine. The mask, you know, kind of gives it that, I mean, it's probably a little bit more matte than it is shiny, but this will make it even more matte. I tried using butcher paper, did not work. I think you need whatever is put onto parchment paper that makes it non-stick. So yeah, definitely use parchment paper. And then you can just press it for a good 10 seconds here, and your image will be much more matte, which I think is really cool. You can kind of, you know, customize it for however you like. You peel it off, and I know it's very, very hard to tell in video, but it really is kind of a matte finish on this onesie. Now, if you want something that has a little bit more shine, you can use a Teflon sheet. Now, I have lots of Teflon sheets, but the one I decided that worked the best for this is actually the Cricut Teflon sheet, which, I mean, many people don't even know they make one, but it has a much smoother surface. You can't feel the kind of weaving of the Teflon because it has some other plastic coating on it. And I thought because of that, it actually didn't imprint any of that, that weaving into the image. So basically, I've got this here, and we're gonna just press it the same way, 10 seconds, and we're gonna get a slightly glossier finish. And again, I know it's probably pretty hard to tell on video, but it does have a little bit more shine than the other one. So that's just a way that you can customize these even more. I think this trick works even better if you've got something like a much larger image, like a photo or something like that. You'd be able to tell the difference even more. I hope you found this tutorial for using Siser's EasyColor DTV helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments. There was a lot to cover, and I know I haven't even scratched the surface of how to, you know, all the things you can probably do with this. I'm hoping to get another pack of this so I can continue to press on other sort of substrates and do some washing tests. But if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I would be happy to look at them and see if I can provide any answers. If you found this helpful, I would love for you to give this video a like, hit subscribe if you want more crafting tutorials, and I'll see you next week.